Nira was invisible, an omega, scraping by on the edge of the pack, left to survive on whatever scraps remained. He was a force of nature, a colossal black wolf wounded and frozen, barely breathing under a layer of snow. She didn't know his name, didn't know where he came from. But when she found him near death, her instincts kicked in. She hauled his massive body into her home, sharing what little warmth she had left. She asked for nothing in return, but in saving him, she became bound to him. He was dying. That's all she knew. 3 days later, her world shattered. The king's guard stormed the peaceful, snow-covered village, and at her doorstep appeared Malric, the Alpha King himself. A tyrant cloaked in black, radiating power and cruelty. But he wasn't looking for the wolf. He was looking for her. The blizzard didn't whisper that night. It screamed, slamming against Nira's cabin like a living thing. Her tiny home stood at the forgotten fringe of the Cinderfall Range, more a shack of wood and willpower than a true shelter. For 3 days, the world had been a blind swirl of snow and wind. Nira the Omega was always last. Last to eat, last to sleep, last to be remembered. Her worth lay in her hands and the salves she mixed in the bones she reset in the quiet magic of healing. But even that was a thankless existence, lived in the shadows of alphas who saw her as little more than dust beneath their boots. That night her firewood was nearly gone. She clutched her threadbare blanket, shivering as the cold crept through every crack. She moved to plug the window stuffing rags where the wind cut deepest. Then a sound pierced the night, not a howl but a sickening thud, followed by a low broken whine. It was gone almost instantly, swallowed by the wind. Nira froze. Logic told her to stay inside. Nothing good waited out in the storm. But then the cry came again, faint and raw, filled with agony. Damn it! She breathed, fog curling from her lips. She threw on her thickest cloak, grabbed her lantern, and snatched up the hatchet she used for splitting kindling. A rope around her waist anchored to the doorframe, her lifeline in the whiteout. She stepped into the fury. "Hello!" she shouted into the storm voice, torn away by the wind. She could barely see past her arm. Snow clawed at her legs, nearly waist deep. She followed the rope, scanning the blur. This was madness. She should turn back. But then her lantern caught on a shape, a void of black, against the snow, tucked beneath an old pine. It was no deer, no rock. It was massive. It was a wolf. Nira moved closer. Not just any wolf, a behemoth. Muscles thick under a pelt of pure midnight, twice the size of the largest beta in the pack. And still, "Oh, spirits," she whispered. Half buried in snow, the wolf radiated deathly cold. She brushed ice from his side. His fur was stiff, matted with blood and frozen. Dark blood, silver wounds. He was alive, barely. A single breath rattled from his chest. He was too big, too heavy. She couldn't move him. She almost gave up. But then his eye opened. Not feral yellow, but amber. Sharp, intelligent, in pain. He saw her. In that gaze she saw not a beast, but a man. I can't leave you," she said, voice trembling. She unhooked the rope from herself, looped it beneath his forelegs. It would be brutal. It would hurt. "Forgive me," she whispered. Then she pulled. For an hour she battled snow and wind, dragged dead weight across the ice, her muscles screaming, lungs on fire. She fell, got back up, step by step, inch by inch, until finally she hauled him through her door and collapsed, slamming it shut behind her, gasping on the floor. For a long moment Nira lay sprawled on the wooden floor chest, heaving, heart thundering against her ribs. The cabin, once a frozen tomb, now felt like a fragile sanctuary. The wolf lay still on her hearth rug, a dark pool blooming beneath him. He was dying. She scrambled upright, ripping off her frozen cloak. One by one, she lit every candle in the room, fed the fire until it roared like a beast, and pulled her thin bedding as close to the flames as she dared. Now came the real test. As she cleaned the wound along his ribs, her breath caught. This wasn't a scratch from a fight or a tumble down a ravine. The skin had turned black, shimmering with an unnatural silver sheen. Silver. Only silver could do this, accursed metal that poisoned their kind, used by hunters or during savage alpha battles. "Who are you?" she whispered, hands gentling as she smeared a poultice of snow thyme and comfrey across the burn. The wolf groaned, body trembling. Naira didn't sleep. She cleaned the wound, forced warm broth past his fangs, and buried him beneath her own blankets. She curled beside him, letting her body heat bleed into his, fighting the creeping silver chill with every ounce of warmth she had. She was a nameless Omega. He was a broken stranger. But in that blizzard, they were just two lives hanging by a thread. By morning, the storm cracked open. Sunlight cut through frost-streaked windows, exposing a wreck of spilled herbs and stained wood. The wolf was gone. Naira bolted up from the stool where she'd passed out. Panic knifed through her chest. He hadn't had the strength to leave. Had he gone back into the snow to die? Then a sharp intake of breath. She spun. There, lying on the blood-soaked blankets, was a man, naked, covered in bruises and scars. Muscle carved down his frame like a warrior, sculpted from pain. His hair, black as the wolf's pelt, clung wet and tangled to his forehead. He was shivering, lips tinged blue, but what stopped her cold was his sheer size. Even lying down, he was massive. Without hesitation, Naira grabbed the thickest quilt she owned and threw it over him, moving quickly like a medic in a battlefield. Her training buried the shock. "You're safe," she murmured, voice low and steady. "You're in my cabin. You were a wolf." His eyes snapped open. Same amber gold. Intelligent. Haunted. He tried to sit up. A snarl ripped from his throat, primal and defensive. Then pain folded him in half, his hand flying to his ribs. The silver burn still festered, black and angry. "Don't move," Naira ordered, pressing him back with steady hands. "You'll tear it open. The silver. It's still inside you." "Silver," he rasped, voice rough like gravel. He stared at his hand, flexing his fingers like they didn't belong to him. Then his gaze locked onto her, sharp and confused. Who are you?" "I'm Naira. I live here," she replied softly, her hands trembling as she prepared another poultice. "I found you in the snow. You were freezing." He blinked, staring up at the rafters. I don't remember." "What don't you remember?" "Anything," he whispered. Fear crept into his face. The storm. The wolf. My name. I don't know who I am. Amnesia. Between the silver, the cold, the shift, his memory was gone. "It's okay," she said, though it wasn't. Every inch of him radiated alpha energy, potent and unstable. A nameless alpha was a loaded gun. "Rest," she told him. "We'll figure it out. For now. Let's call you Thorn. It means strong. You're strong to have survived." "Thorn," he repeated, testing it. Then his eyes found hers again. "Naira, you saved me. I stopped you from dying." She corrected, pressing the hot poultice to his ribs. He flinched, muscles going rigid, but didn't push her away. "The rest is up to you." The next day passed in a fever dream. Naira fed him broth, which he drank like a starving man. She found her father's old clothes too small, but they gave him modesty. He drifted in and out, never fully awake. But when his eyes were open, he watched her. Not with suspicion, with something quieter, something that saw her. And he said nothing. He watched her move with quiet precision, mending her torn cloak, weaving her long brown hair into a simple braid, sweeping the scattered remnants of their chaotic days back into order. "You're not afraid of me," Thorn said, his voice rough but steadier now. It was the third afternoon since the storm. He sat propped against the wall, the quilt pooled low around his waist. Naira paused mid-stitch needle, trembling in her fingers. "I am a little," she admitted. "But you were hurt. And you're a healer." He said more a fact than a question. "I am. You're also an Omega." Her hands stilled. That word alone carried 1,000 years of weight. "Yes." "They let you stay out here this far from the pack's core." Nira's voice tightened. "They don't stop me. They don't care enough to. It's easier this way. I treat the sick. I stay out of the way. Quiet life." Thorn's gaze swept over the cabin. Then his eyes landed on the hatchet near the door. "Doesn't look quiet to me," he said. "Looks like survival." She gave a wry smile. "It is." Silence fell, not awkward, but weighted with something unspoken. For the first time in her life, Naira wasn't shrinking in the presence of alpha power. With Thorn, it felt different. He was dangerous, yes, but his energy hummed low and steady like a storm that had passed but left lightning in the air. There was a pull between them, not fear, not duty, something else, something old. "Naira," he began, his voice suddenly taut. But then the sound came, distant, metallic, and heavy. The great iron bell from the village far below. Not the wild panic of a rogue attack. This was slower, final, law. Naira bolted to the window. Her stomach dropped. Not rogues, soldiers. Figures marched in tight formation, gleaming armor of black and silver. Dozens of them. The kind of precision that stifled the air itself. At the front, atop a monstrous warhorse, rode a man whose mere presence hit her like a blow. Her knees nearly buckled. "Royal Guard," she whispered, blood icing over. Thorn was already pushing up from the floor, ignoring the pain. He moved to stand in front of her. "Who are they?" "The king's men," she said, heart pounding. "And him." "That's him." The rider dismounted. He was tall, impossibly so, draped in dark furs and obsidian-polished armor. His hair glinted like spun gold. His eyes were cold glacial blue, beautiful, terrifying. Malric, the Alpha King. He didn't hesitate. Walked straight to her door, boots crushing snow. He didn't knock. He stared through the window at her and smiled. It wasn't warm. It was possession. He's looking right at me," Naira whispered, breath catching. Thorn placed a protective hand on her shoulder. "Stay behind me." The cabin door didn't open. It exploded. Wood blasted inward, shards flying like shrapnel under an invisible force of raw alpha command. Naira screamed, and Thorn shielded her, taking the brunt of the debris. Malric stood in the splintered doorway, light outlining him like some wrathful god. His gaze swept the wreckage, paused briefly on Thorn with scorn, then landed on Naira. He inhaled deeply. "There you are," Malric purred, his voice silk wrapped around a blade. "I have searched so long for you." His presence was suffocating. It pressed down on her chest, filled her lungs, forced her instincts to submit. Her knees nearly gave out. This was what true dominance felt like, a command not spoken, but lived in every breath. Beside her, Thorn growled under his breath, knees wobbling under the unnatural pressure. His memory still fractured, instincts dulled by trauma. "Your Majesty." Nira forced the words, bowing her head, voice barely holding. I apologize for the door." Malric didn't blink. He stepped inside, boots grinding wood to powder. Behind him, a ring of royal guards formed, led by a man with a sharp jaw and colder eyes. Dren. "She is an Omega, Your Majesty," Dren's stated, tone clipped. "Are you certain?" "Do you doubt my senses, Captain?" Malric snapped, voice dropping like a hammer. Dren flinched. "No, my king. The cabin was no longer Naira's. It was Malric's hunting ground, and she was his prey. Malric shifted his gaze fully onto Naira, and the air thickened with menace. He began to circle her eyes sharp and assessing like a predator sizing up a meal. He stopped in front of the hearth, glancing at the bloodied blankets that tossed aside poultice. Then finally at Thorn, who stood his ground, body tense. "And what exactly is this?" Malric sneered, curling his lip. He gestured at Thorn with casual disdain. "A stray you decided to drag in. He was wounded." Nira replied, voice shaky but holding. "I'm a healer. I helped him." "A healer," Malric echoed, voice cold with mockery. He stepped closer. His gloved finger traced the edge of her jaw. Naira flinched away, but Thorn moved faster, his hand snapping up to seize the king's wrist. The room erupted in tension. "Don't touch her," Thorn growled, voice primal protective fury surging through him. Malric didn't flinch. He arched an eyebrow. "You dare," he whispered. With a flick of his arm, Malric shattered Thorn's grip and backhanded him. The crack of the blow echoed off the cabin walls. Thorn flew backward, slamming into the table splinters raining around him. He was an alpha, but still recovering, and Malric was something far more dangerous. "Thorn!" Nira cried, rushing toward him. "Don't!" Malric ordered. "Stay where you are, Omega." She froze, caught between his command and her instinct to protect. Malric pointed at Thorn, now bloodied and struggling to rise. You are nothing. A nameless rogue, trespassing on my land, laying hands on what is mine. She's not yours." Thorn spat, forcing himself upright. Malric ignored him, his tone chillingly calm as he turned to Naira. "You don't even know what's happening, do you, little bird, living in this shack, hiding from a fate you were born into?" "I don't understand," Nira whispered, her body trembling. "My court has searched 3 years, Malric said, folding his fingers together. The words of the seer were clear. "When the shadowed moon rises over the black ridge, the king shall find his anchor. An Omega of the forgotten wood, a healer's touch that gives shelter to the fallen star." His smile stretched slow and sure. "I am that king. This is the forgotten wood. And you, Naira, you are the healer." Her thoughts scattered. Her breath vanished. "A prophecy," she said. "A destiny," Malric corrected. "You are my fated mate, Omega, the one meant to secure my legacy." His words hit like stone. Mate. To him. This cruel, arrogant tyrant, Naira stared into his pale eyes and felt only dread. The hum under her skin. The pull she had mistaken as something else. She glanced at Thorn, bruised amber eyes, wide confusion bleeding into pain. And suddenly it made sense. The connection hadn't started the night she found Thorn. It began when Malric and his men had crossed into Cinderfall. The pull wasn't warmth. It was force. "No," she whispered. "That's not possible." "It is," Malric said, his voice like silk over steel. "The fallen star was me, burdened by my crown. You gave shelter to what you thought was trash. That alone proves the prophecy." He stepped toward her again, grabbing her chin, forcing her to meet his gaze. "You will be my queen." "And if I refuse?" Naira asked, barely audible but firm. His smile vanished. His grip tightened, nails biting into her skin. "An Omega does not refuse an Alpha King. You will come to the Obsidian Citadel. You will accept the bond, and you will be grateful." His eyes shifted to Thorn. "As for your little pet, he touched a king. The law demands his death." "No," Naira cried out. "Please, he didn't know. He has no memory. Please, Your Majesty, I'm begging you, don't hurt him." She swallowed hard. "I'll go with you. I'll go. Just let him live." Malric studied her for a long moment. The fear, the plea. And he smiled again, not with kindness but calculation. Malric studied her face, reading the fear she didn't bother to hide. The panic in her eyes, the raw desperation in her voice as she pleaded for Thorn's life. He saw all of it, and he knew how to use it. "Very well," he said at last, letting go of her arm. "Your compassion, it's admirable, a trait fitting of a future queen." He turned to Dren. "The stray lives. Leave him in this filth. He's beneath my concern." Then he seized Naira by the wrist. "You, with me, we leave for the capital. My things, you'll have silks, gold, whatever you want. You won't need these rags." He dragged her from the only home she had ever known. Naira looked back one last time, eyes locking with Thorn's. His face was a mask of blood and rage and helplessness, but his golden eyes, they burned with a promise. As Malric threw her onto a horse, the procession turned and began its march from Cinderfall. Thorn stood in the splintered doorway of the cabin that had sheltered him. He watched her vanish into the falling snow. And just as the last banner disappeared from sight, something inside him cracked. A memory. Gold light. A chalice. The taste of metal. A searing pain. And a voice smooth and cold, identical to the king's. "Sleep now, brother." The Obsidian Citadel was not a palace. It was a fortress carved into the bones of a black mountain, its towers clawing at the sky, its halls echoing with silence and cold. Nira was no guest. She was a prisoner. The moment she arrived, she was stripped of dignity, scrubbed raw by silent servants who never met her eyes, dressed in gowns that constricted her breath and gleamed like they cost more than her village ever had. They hung heavy with jewels, cold as the eyes watching her. "You are the moon to my sun, Naira," Malric told her on the second night at a dinner table longer than most streets in Cinderfall. Beta lords bowed and scraped while alpha wives sneered behind jeweled fans. "You will reflect my light." "I'm not a mirror," Nira replied, voice low but firm. A hush swept the table. Malric's smile didn't reach his eyes. "You are what I say you are," he murmured, voice smooth as poisoned silk. "And you will learn your place." He never yelled. He never struck her. His tyranny was colder than that. Words like chains. Rules like traps. His hand always guiding her elbow just a bit too tightly. His voice always in her ear. He paraded her like a prize. Told his court she was the anchor, the one fate had promised. Spoke of prophecy, of legacy. But his eyes never softened, and his touch never warmed. She was watched. Guards outside her door. Escorts in the halls. No access to gardens, to air to escape. Only one person dared show kindness. Vexa, the royal physician. A sharp, weathered woman who carried herself like she saw too much and suffered little foolishness. "You must eat, my lady," Vexa said on the 5th day. Naira sat by the window staring at soldiers, drilling in cold formation. "Why? So I can be a well-fed broodmare for a monster." Vexa sighed, setting the tray down. "The king is complex. Ruthless, yes. But he brought stability." "The prophecy," Naira whispered, eyes still distant. "He says he's the fallen star. But he isn't. He's not fallen. He's a black hole. He devours everything near him." She turned, her voice rising. "When I was with Thorn, when I thought he was just a rogue, I felt warmth. With Malric, I only feel cold." Vexa faltered. "Thorn, the one from the village. He's not just a rogue," Naira said, a conviction blooming from somewhere she couldn't name. "He's someone else. I feel it." "Be careful," Vexa warned, her voice barely above a whisper. "The king sees more than you think. He hears more, and he is desperate to bind the bond. The full moon is in a week. That's when he plans the ritual." Naira went still. A forced bond would be a violation. Vexa finished for her. But he believes it necessary. For power. For the kingdom. Naira felt her stomach twist. Please eat. You'll need your strength. Whatever you decide. That night, Malric entered her chambers. He dismissed the guards. The heavy door closed behind him with a final echoing click. You don't seem comfortable? He observed, pouring 2 glasses of deep red wine. He extended a glass to her. She didn't reach for it. This place isn't a home, it's a gilded cage. It's the heart of the realm. Our realm, Malric corrected, settling onto the settee, the wine swirling in his grasp like blood. You're still thinking about that stray, aren't you? Naira gave no reply. He sneered. Typical Omega weakness. That nameless nothing, you pity him, I should have ended him. Maybe I still will if that's what it takes to snap you out of this delusion. You wouldn't, she gasped, dread rising. I would burn your entire village to cinders if it meant preserving my legacy, he said, voice as cold as obsidian. The prophecy chose me. Fate chose you, and I won't let you defy destiny much longer. He moved in closer, resting the untouched wine on a table beside her. I pulled you from nothing. I offer a crown power protection, and you grieve for a broken wolf in the snow. He's not a stray. She snapped, anger overriding fear. He's a man you beat half to death, one with no memory who still carries more honor than you. The slap came without warning, sharp, surgical. Her lips split, the coppery taste of blood blooming on her tongue. She glared at him, trembling fury and disbelief boiling beneath the surface. Malric glanced at his own hand, expression flickering, then hardened again. The bond seals at the full moon, he declared. Whether you yield or not, Orin has seen it. The ceremony is set. You will be Queen Naira. Accept it. He turned and exited, the heavy lock sealing with a final ominous click. Naira crumpled to the floor, cheek throbbing. The mate pull, once warm, now felt like a shackle, a curse in disguise. She touched the blood on her lip, and it hit her he was right about one thing. She was resisting fate. But maybe Malric hadn't found his true mate. Maybe he had stolen the wrong Omega. Back in Cinderfall, Thorn was far from idle. After Naira was ripped from him, he had collapsed, trauma, pain, and confusion flooding his system. He remained on the cabin floor for hours, the cold slowly creeping back in. He was discovered by Malus, the village elder, a no-nonsense beta who had watched the royal invasion with skeptical eyes. When the guard left, she and 2 others ventured into Naira's ruined home. Spirits have mercy, Malus murmured, taking in the wreckage. They found him near, delirious, mumbling in fever. The silver wound Malric reopened had worsened. Get him to my cellar. Now, she ordered. And not a word to anyone. If the king spared him, it was either a mistake or a setup. Either way, we don't provoke an alpha king. For 2 days, Thorn battled fevered dreams and darkness. Malus, using Naira's herbs, worked desperately to keep him alive. She wasn't a healer, but she was unyielding. Memories shattered through his mind like lightning laughter. A grand feast. A golden-haired man who looked like Malric, but wasn't. A toast. To my brother. The man cheered. A forest hunt. Pine, rain. A silver arrow, from nowhere, piercing his side. Pain. Collapse. A voice low and familiar, whispering, "It should have been me, Thorn. Always me. The prophecy. The fallen star. She will be mine, not yours." Wine not at a feast, but in a sick room. The arrow removed. Malric's hand feeding him something thick and dark. A tonic, brother, for the pain. It had burned going down. And then, everything went black. It tasted of silver. On the 3rd day, Thorn bolted upright in the darkness of the cellar, and what escaped his lips wasn't confusion. It was fury. Malric, he growled. He wasn't the broken wanderer anymore. He was Thorn, the rightful Alpha King of the United Territories. Malric, the man who'd once called him brother, had poisoned him, tried to erase him, and then claimed everything that was his. The throne, the prophecy, even Naira. It all came flooding back. The hunt meant to end in assassination. The poisoned wine. The betrayal. Malric had dumped him wounded and dying into the frozen wilds of Cinderfall, hoping nature would finish the job. But destiny hadn't died that day. It had only gone dormant. The prophecy from Orin had been clear. You will find your mate, my king, when you are lowest. She will be a healer's hand who shelters the fallen star. Thorn had been the fallen star all along. Malric had twisted the words to suit his ambitions. But fate had a different plan. When Malric discovered Nira nursing a lost wolf, he thought she was meant for him. Instead, he had walked into the arms of the prophecy and into his worst mistake, because Thorn was alive and burning with a purpose, weak but focused. Thorn climbed out of the cellar. The silver still gnawed at him, but his power was rising again. Golden fire sparked in his eyes. Malus opened the door, gasping at the change. Your eyes. They're royal. I need your help, Thorn said, his voice no longer lost or confused. What day is it? The 6th since she was taken, she whispered. The full moon rises tomorrow, he said. He'll force the bond. Malus looked stunned. The citadel is 200 miles away, and you're barely standing. Thorn clenched his fists. He left me alive. That was his mistake. He remembered the fortress well. Its back doors, its buried secrets, its shadows. I don't need an army, he said with a razor grin. Just one opening. Among Naira's herbs he spotted a pouch of dried wolfsbane. Poisonous but powerful. He expects a king charging the gates, Thorn muttered. He'll get a ghost through the sewers. The full moon hung like a silver blade over the Obsidian Citadel, casting hard light on the ritual hall. Naira stood candent and suffocating on the raised dais, draped in white silk and moon-cut diamonds that weighed her down like chains. Painted. Bound. A puppet for a ritual she had never chosen. The crowd buzzed with forced reverence. Alphas and betas alike filled the hall, whispering a fate of the prophecy of the Omega Bride. Malric stood across from her in black and gold, his arrogance leaking from every motion. My people, his voice boomed, amplified by magic. Tonight the fates bless us. Our kingdom is whole, our prophecy fulfilled. The crowd cheered a cheer laced with fear. Malric lifted a ceremonial chalice toward Naira. Healer of Cinderfall, he declared. Drink and bind our souls, complete our destiny. She stared at the wine, a dark red mirror of the one he'd offered her before. Her heart thudded. Her mind rebelled. She looked at him, a man of ice and hunger. Then in her mind came Thorn's gaze. Warm, fierce, loyal. She remembered the bruises, the threats, the prison. And in that moment her soul screamed. No, she said. Her voice was clear, final. A war cry in a room of silence. The words struck the hall like a thunderbolt, echoing in the tense stillness. Malric's smile faltered, lips twitching. What did you say, my dear? He murmured, voice low and dangerous. I said no, Nira answered, her voice gaining strength. She looked out over the gathering of nobles, fear falling away. I, Naira of Cinderfall, reject this bond. Gasps rippled through the court. Rejecting a fated mate was nearly unthinkable. But to defy the Alpha King was suicidal. Malric's face twisted, the polished mask cracking to reveal fury. You dare, he hissed. You will not make a fool of me. You will drink this, or I'll force it down your throat. Then you'll have to, Naira said, stepping back. The fates might have marked me, but they gave me choice, and I don't choose you. You ungrateful Omega bitch! Malric roared, his restraint snapping. He lunged, seizing her arm with bruising force. You are mine. She belongs to no one but herself. The voice thundered from the entrance, pulsing with raw alpha command. Every head turned. Standing in the massive doorway was a lone figure, wounded, cloaked in grime and shadows. But his stance was pure power. His golden amber eyes blazed like wildfire beneath the moonlight. "Thorn!" Naira screamed, her heart torn between hope and fear. Malric laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "You dare call my brother by that mutt's name?" Murmurs surged through the crowd, but Thorn strode forward, his alpha aura rolling like a coming storm. Unlike Malric's icy pressure, his presence was a burning force, commanding alive. "Malric!" Thorn growled, his voice ringing with the ancient authority of a true king. "Your reign of lies ends now." Malric stumbled back, releasing Naira. "You're dead." "I killed you. The silver. You failed," Thorn said coldly, now 20 feet from the dais. "You poisoned your king. Your own brother left me to die. You took my crown, and now you've tried to pluck my mate." His eyes found Naira's, softening. "The prophecy wasn't yours. I was the fallen star she saved." He turned back to Malric, voice like steel. "You're no king. You're a usurper. A traitor." The words slammed through the court. Noble lords stared at Malric with horror dawning in their eyes. Dren, hand on hilt, went pale as he took in Thorn's presence. "He's lying," Malric screamed. "He's an impostor. Guards, seize him." Some guards hesitated. The two alpha forces collided in the air, locking their wills. "He lies," Thorn's voice boomed. "He betrayed blood and bond. He feared a prophecy not his. He's no ruler. He's a coward," Malric roared, drawing his blade. "I brought order. I am stronger. This kingdom is mine." "Then prove it," Thorn said, voice dropping to a deadly calm. He cast aside his tattered cloak, unarmed, bare-chested, scarred. "Wrath-gore," he declared. "Trial by combat. Here, now." Malric's eyes widened. He couldn't refuse, not without losing everything. He scanned the room. The court waited, judging. Naira's eyes burned with hope. "You're bleeding. You're broken." Malric sneered, sword raised. "I'll enjoy killing you again." "I accept." The chamber emptied into a great circle. The full moon cast silver light onto the ring. Malric stood in regal armor, blade gleaming. Thorn faced him, unarmed, chest bare, silver wound exposed. Raw, honest. "This is madness, Thorn," Naira whispered from the edge where Vexa held her in place. "He's armed and you're still poisoned." "The poison is why I'll win," Thorn said, golden eyes locked on his brother. "It kept my instincts sharp. He's gone soft on a stolen throne." Malric had long dismissed the strength of his wolf form. He relied on swordplay, cold steel, and technique. "Prepare to join the ancestors, brother," he sneered. "You first," Thorn shot back. Malric charged blade, flashing like lightning, made it aim straight at Thorn's heart. But Thorn didn't meet it. He slipped past like a shadow, dodging at the last moment and slamming an elbow into Malric's helmet. The clang echoed. Malric stumbled, rattled by the strike. "You fight like a thug," Malric spat. "And you fight like a coward in tin," Thorn growled. The clash was savage, Malric's trained precision versus Thorn's primal fury. The sword found flesh, slashing Thorn's arm, chest, thigh. Blood ran in thin rivulets. But he didn't falter. He absorbed the pain, let it burn into strength, kept pressing closer. Malric began to slow. The armor weighed on him. Breath came harder. "You're nothing." Malric howled, his strikes growing erratic. "The prophecy was mine." He lunged, wild, desperate. Thorn anticipated it. He didn't move away. He caught Malric's sword wrist bones snapping under his grip. Malric screamed. With his other hand, Thorn seized his brother's throat, lifted him off the ground, and slammed him into the dais. The sword clattered. Malric's helmet flew. The same blue eyes stared back now wide with fear. Thorn's claws emerged black and gleaming. He pressed a thumb to his brother's throat. "You can't," Malric gasped, scratching at Thorn's wrist. "The king's curse. It'll destroy you. You already invoked it when you poisoned me." Thorn growled, voice like thunder before a storm. The court was frozen. Naira watched, breath hitched hand over her lips. Retribution hung in the balance. Thorn's eyes reflected fire-snow betrayal. It would take just one motion. Then he looked past Malric, at her. She wasn't bloodthirsty. She was afraid but also hopeful, like she had been when she found him half dead in the snow. He closed his eyes. He wouldn't become his brother. He roared not in rage but in dominance, and hurled Malric to the ground at Dren's feet. "He's defeated," Thorn declared, voice reverberating with command. "He yields. Wrath-gore is done." Turning his back, final act of dominance. "Seize him," Thorn ordered. "The usurper goes to the silver cells. Let him await judgment, as a traitor, not as king." Dren looked from one brother to the other. He bowed. "My king," he said. Guards moved, dragging the broken Malric to his feet. You let me live," Malric whispered. "You'll rot in a cell," Thorn said coldly, "remembering the crown you stole and the honor you never had." Silence reigned as Malric was dragged away. Thorn stood bleeding, swaying slightly, the marble beneath his feet stained red. Naira broke from Vexa. She ran. No royal grace, no hesitation. She threw herself into his arms, clutching him, face buried in his shoulder. "Thorn!" She cried the name, like salvation. He tensed, wounded, but then wrapped his arms around her with a strength born of pain and purpose. He pressed his face into her hair. "Naira." He exhaled slowly. The destined mate bond, the connection she had mistaken for Damien, now surged into place 1,000-fold stronger, 1,000-fold warmer. It wasn't a chain. It was an anchor, a home him. It had always been him. "You're bleeding," she murmured instinctively, pulling back her heel. "It's nothing," he said, his golden eyes locking on hers, searching her face. "You're lying. Did he hurt you?" Naira touched her split lip, already beginning to seal. "He tried," Thorn admitted. Thorn's expression darkened, but Naira lifted her hand to his cheek. "It's over. You're home now. You're the true fallen star," Thorn whispered. He looked at her, the Omega healer who had dragged a dying wolf from the heart of a blizzard, who had defied a tyrant who now stood in the center of the court, holding her true mate. Slowly, deliberately, he leaned down and kissed her in front of the entire kingdom. It was not a kiss of possession. It was a promise of partnership. The court, witnessing this, finally understood. One by one they knelt, the alphas, betas, all of them. Thorn, the true Alpha King, had returned, and at his side, steadying him, was the Omega who had saved him. The storm had passed, a new reign beginning. The great hall remained silent. A sea of bowed heads, yet only two figures, stood, the bleeding king and the Omega healer clinging to him. The adrenaline of battle faded, and Thorn swayed, finally giving in to the weight of his wounds, the lingering silver poison and deep exhaustion. Naira caught him, her small frame holding up his massive one. "He needs help," she cried, her voice cutting through the silence with an authority no one dared question. "Vexa. Now." The bond was broken. Servants and guards scrambled. Vexa rushed forward, face a mix of awe and professional urgency. "To the royal chambers. Quickly get the physician's kit." Thorn refused to be carried. Leaning heavily on Dren and another loyal guard, he moved forward, never taking his eyes off Naira, who walked beside him, hand never leaving his. They left the ceremonial hall, a king reclaimed and a queen forged by her own hands, leaving the stunned court to process the revolution of the night. Once inside Thorn's chambers, once Damien's arrogant territory, Naira took charge. "All of you, out," she ordered the servants. "Except you, doctor. And I need boiling water, clean linen, and comfrey root from my satchel. It's still in the tunnel where you left it," Vexa said. "I have superior supplies," Naira replied, ripping her ceremonial silk gown into clean strips. "But I trust what I know. I know this poison. I fought it before." Vexa glanced at Naira, then at Thorn, whose gaze held absolute trust. "As you say." "Your Majesty," the doctor acknowledged, addressing Naira with respect. For the next hour, Naira worked. She cleaned each sword wound with steady, precise hands. Thorn never flinched, his golden eyes tracking her every move. The deepest wound wasn't from Damien's blade. It was the old blackened silver burn on his side, torn open again. He had underestimated her. Thorn rasped as she applied a steaming poultice. He thought the silver was his ally. Didn't realize it kept me tethered to the earth, to the cold. It kept me from forgetting the pain. "It almost killed you," Naira whispered, voice tight with memory. "No," Thorn said, catching her hand, pressing her knuckles to his lips. "You saved me." Once bandaged and given a sleeping draught by Vexa, the doctor finally left, leaving the two of them in quiet. Moonlight streamed through the chamber. Naira, in her torn, blood-stained gown, sat on the edge of the massive bed. Thorn, breathing deep and steady, slept at last. The bond between them shimmered in the air, a golden thread, a hum that resonated through her very soul. This was nothing like Damien's cold, demanding presence. This was sanctuary. He was all of it. Her mate, her king, the wolf who had been lost to the storm. She was his healer, his omega, his queen. Not a prisoner. She was his partner. Thorn's eyes flickered open, still heavy with the draught, but enough to see her watching him, her expression thoughtful. "You are not a reflection of my light, Naira," he whispered, echoing Damien's cruel words. "You are the flame that lit the fire." Naira gave him a watery smile. "Get some sleep, my king. You have a kingdom to rebuild tomorrow." He corrected, slipping his hand into hers in the darkness. "We have a kingdom to rebuild." And so the Omega from the Forgotten Woods and the Stray King rewrote their destiny. True strength was not control or ruthlessness, but resilience, honor, and the courage to heal. Naira, once thought least, became most. She was not his reflection. She was his heart. Their bond was forged not in prophecy, but in blizzard ice and rebellion fire, stronger than any crown. What did you think of Naira's courage? Was Thorn right to spare his brother? Share your thoughts below. This story took time to tell. If you enjoyed it, show your support by liking, sharing with friends who love epic tales, and subscribing for more dramatic stories. Your support means everything. Thank you for listening.